Hey, this is day 252 of reading the whole Bible. Today we are on Ezekiel 40 to 42. Let's go. All three of these chapters are going to cover for us an account of Ezekiel's vision of the temple and visiting Israel in a vision. First time he's done this. Remember, everything he's giving, every prophecy and everything that he is seeing and speaking and doing, it all takes place in captivity in Babylon. He is not in Israel. But now he gets a vision where he is carried to Israel, but some future version of Israel where there is a new temple that is massive. I mean, it covers, like, once you do the measurements, it's like 17 and a half acres. It's enormous. It's way bigger than Solomon's temple, way bigger than the second temple that is built. It's huge. Now, one interesting thing about this vision of the temple is that the Lord's presence departs the temple in Ezekiel chapter 10. He has a vision of the Lord departing the temple, and that's through the east gate. And the way that this thing is arranged is it's, a giant square. The other one was rectangular, but this is a giant square, and it's got three gates. All the buildings are up against the west side of it, and they face out to the east. And then, so the right and left gates, so to speak, from the orientation within the temple are north and south. And so the Lord has departed from straight out from the inner sanctuary, straight out that gate in front of that space, which would be the eastern gate. Later, that's how he's going to return to. So that one's kind of special. The description we get of the angelic guide that Ezekiel is with is slightly different from the previous time that he's had a guide like this, probably because different person. Not that critical. What is important is the objects he's holding. He's got basically a yardstick and a measuring tape. That's the reed and the linen rope. These are ways of measuring. You'd use the yardstick for short things, like a ruler, and then measuring tape for the long one. Ezekiel gets a tour of the entire place. And like I said, we start with the eastern gate. We go into the outer court, see the other gates and some of the other features of everything. And we get somewhat detailed descriptions as it goes on. We get less and less, especially when, talking about the other gates, because like I just told you what they look like. They are all the same. And so you get the first one and then the other one, it's just like those ones. Same size. One thing to note, it seems that the outer court is lower than the inner court. And so as you go in toward the holy place, you also go up in elevation. Each thing has steps that go up to it. And so you go up and in, further up, further in. Little C.S. Lewis reference there, but further up, further in to get toward the most holy place in the inner court. And Ezekiel accompanies his guide into all of these places, except at one point, they get into the smallest place, and the guide walks in and measures everything and reports the measurements and then looks at him and says, "This is the most holy place." And Ezekiel isn't in there. That's the only place he wouldn't be able to go because he's a priest, remember. So Ezekiel has the right to go in everywhere else, but even in this vision, he's not allowed to go into the most holy place. That's only accessible once per year on the Day of Atonement by the high priest himself and nobody else. As they continue their tour, he also points out two buildings. So there's the main temple sanctuary in the center, up against the west wall, and then on either side of it to the north and to the south, remember, because the back, as far as the view of this goes, is up against the west side. And so you have north and south chambers next to it where the priests would go, and the Levites and everybody that's working in the temple. And so those that are allowed to go in any farther, that's where they do a lot of their priestly duties, and also where they change, where the priests would change from going in the outer court where faithful Jews are allowed. And then when they transition into the inner court, you don't just walk into the inner court. The priests change their clothes and have an entirely different wardrobe that is clean and not for outside usage inside the inner court. There's a whole lot of details, and yet quite a few less than we have received when we look, think back to the early parts of the Old Testament when we're getting the description of how to build the tabernacle and even Solomon's temple. There's so much more detail because these aren't plans for how to actually construct it. This is a measurement of the increasing and ever important glory and holiness of God. And as this is a place for his glory to dwell among humanity, that's sort of where the emphasis is that there's these separations and these differences that as you get closer in to the glory of God, you have to offer sacrifices. You have to strip things away and be clothed in clean garments that are only for this, that are holy, set apart uniquely for that. The importance of approaching God properly is not to make us feel like, oh, I can't go to church wearing a t-shirt, or to in any way make us feel like we should be restricted from coming to church, approaching the Lord in the altar, or, even taking communion, or, all sorts of ways we try to interpret those things just kind of naturally. We go, oh, so does that mean I can't? No, it doesn't mean you can't. What it should end up meaning and saying to us, that it was a high price that Christ paid to give us direct access each to the presence of the Lord. That is important. That should help us just to have an appreciation for the depth and glory of the sacrifice of Christ and what it means that he has given us free reign, free access to boldly approach the throne of God ourselves. And so that's what stands out to me. I hope that speaks to you and encourages you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, and comments. So let's talk about that in the chat on this video or on the Bible app. Thanks for reading with us. Be rad for Jesus.